Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa. My guest today is Aabhas Maldahiyar, who is a architect by profession and a historian by choice. I speak to Abbas about his foray into history writing, his very interesting background as a committed Marxist and how that changed, and what it will take for us to write history from a Bharatiya perspective. I also talked to him about his latest book, Babur, the Chessboard King. We speak about how Babur was thrust on the throne at 11 years old and his conquests following that of Fargana, Kabul, and of course his eventual entry into Hindustan. Then about the legacy and impact of Babur. Uh, if you think you know your history, well, this episode is going to shatter a lot of myths and perceptions around Babur. This was a fascinating conversation, and I hope you like it. Hey, Abbas, welcome to the Bharatvaarta podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure to be on your show. I'm looking forward to interact and chat with you on various things which you quiz me for.
Right. No, I know we've been discussing this, and so happy that you can finally make time for this. I feel like you have such an interesting background, right? I mean, we're just talking about being an architect, and so on and so forth, right? Um, I, how did history writing happen? How did you discover history writing, and what has that journey been like?
So it's a very interesting journey. At least it's interesting for me. I don't know how people relate to it, but because like any typical Bihari, I would call myself Bihari because that time it was not Jharkhand, it was Bihar. So the first dream for Bihari is generally to be an IITian. You get into an IIT, or you crack the medicals, or if nothing works out, please get into
UPSC.
civil
Right.
services. So there was no other way out, and somehow even if your parents don't tell it, it is embedded in your mind, looking at how the things transpire around you. So was the case with me too, but fortunately, I am born to a historian, as in my father is a historian, and so be it that it was a small town where I was born, Hazaribagh in Jharkhand. And small towns have very interesting characters which you will not find in larger cities. So one such character is that the students do come for the extra classes, as in, because my father was a professor, and but many students would not be able to make it to the classes because of other commitments which they have to do. Like small towns have very different nature, as I already said, that people have to do many other things apart from studies even at the younger age. So in the evenings they would come to my father to get further extra classes around history, and the father deals with late medieval and early modern history, and he would talk about the British era. He would talk about what it meant to be like Mughal Empire, what it was to the Indians, and he was basically talk about the emperors, Akbar, Babur. Not much about Babur and Humayun, but certainly about Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, etc., and about Marathas. And at times in passing, he will give the references about the Guptas. So basically, from childhood, I had this thing around me. History was walking. History walked in and around with me. And it so does happen that if you are inducted to some those ideas initially, they always carry forward. They do happen with you, keep happening. Say that somebody is having a background of his father or somebody else in the house belonging to fine art, then it's quite obvious that fine art will become part and partial of his life. Even if she's not practicing, he would like to collect the fine art works, curate something for his own house. So that connection is always there. So for me, it was history, and because it's quite an interesting background for me, I consider myself to be a Marxist. Back then, of course, and now I'm an ex-Marxist. So, and you happen to become a Marxist because you feel that perhaps you will bring the revolution. You can bring the change.
You'll finally get it right.
Yeah, and it does happen that if you are born in a Hindu family, the system is a bit too open. It's that it's just so fluidic at times. There is, I won't say there's a lack of discipline, but perhaps this is nature of the the system itself, that even if you do this, it's fine. If you don't do this, then also it's fine. There's not gonna be somebody elderly in a house who will pester you all the time. Hey, you didn't do this. You must do this, right? There's not something called must do this. And like other people who were aspiring for IIT Dream, science was my background, and and the rationality automatically walks in the mind of a Hindu, because you are led to believe that perhaps all the traditions are superstitious. They have nothing good to offer in the society, and they are the bunch of liars who tell you the lies about the idols and murtis, etc. And there's nothing out there in the religion except for ill practices, whether it is about the casteism, whether it's about the sati pratha, and all those what the Marxists give you, right? That this is the problem of society. So that was always there in back of my mind, and I was becoming a perfect fodder to be fed somewhere, who would just end up becoming the result of that fodder coming out of somewhere would be that he would be a Marxist, because the adjective of Marxism, the prima facie, is that you are supposed to be hating your culture and civilization to begin with. You are supposed to be rationalist, and to be rationalist you have to hate your civilization. Some I'm just telling you that how the dictate flows. That's how it flows. Though it's not the reality, but these are the checklists that you keep on checking the box, and you are right there on the way. And I am already off from the tradition, and I have joined an architecture school. And the moment you get into architecture school, this is a place where you are supposed to look into more and more for freedom of expression, because you're supposed to create something which doesn't exist. You have to imagine, and imagination is all about freedom of expression. And you are inducted into the ideas of the art movement, say modernism, postmodernism. You read postmodernism, you get to deconstructivism, the ideas of Derrida, and all these guys fall into your line. And if you have got interest in literature, you will fall back to Marxism, because this all ideas ultimately germinates from or comes from the idea of Marxism, or the idea of rejecting a tradition, idea of seeing that what was in the past is wrong, and we have to एक नए दौर की शुरुआत करनी है, we have to start something new. And so Marxism began to look like the Vogue to me, and then it will bring the change. And that's when, and because anybody who is dealing with any political movement, say it Marxism or trying to be conservative or anything, he or she will be connected with history. And of course, I had this pedigree already of history, because I heard the tales of history, and I always saw the books of history on the bookshelves of my father. So it always was there with me. But now, more and more, the academic history began to superimpose over all the ideas what I had. So what I mean to say is that I am already believing that my tradition is wrong. They were superstition. They were anti-woman. They were anti people who are low down in the hierarchy or something. Society was a very dark one. And further on, this layer of academic history was being put over whatever I was reading along with the Marxist lens. So, but there was an awakening, and that awakening, it happened somewhere down the line around 2012 or 13. And when that came in, I began to look into the Indic traditions even more. And the time,
If I can just stop you and ask you, what was the trigger for you?
yeah. So I already explained that how I had got into the idea that Marxism can be the only solution. And just to clarify to the people, when even then I was quite patriotic, because I felt that I have to follow Marxism because this is good for my country. And every August 15 and Jan 26, I would go out into the field and dig the earth to fix in the post where I will do the flag hosting. So, and a BSF camp was just 7 kilometers away from my house, and the guys would be marching in the morning, and I will salute them. So this was my childhood like, and I felt that perhaps Marxism is the ritual I need to follow to bring good for the country. But coming to the trigger point, I was working as a research assistant at a college, and I had taken certain number of students for a study trip, and the trip was to Ajanta Caves and the Ellora Caves. And for the first time, I witnessed the grandeur of the Ellora Caves. And the moment I walked into it and I saw the Kailasha temple, I was like, wow, because so far I had just drawn the sketches of Kailasha temple for 10 petty marks in history of architecture, but I didn't knew that what this sketch actually looked like, what it was like. The details were mind boggling. I just couldn't imagine that what it is about. That how can someone do the things at such a perfection, right? But that was still okay, that okay, you can do the grandeur and you can build giant structure with that much of detail, something would have been there. But what really was baffling was what I saw in Ajanta Caves, because Ajanta Caves are the place where you have got paintings. This is known for the paintings, and most of the paintings are about Jataka tales and whatever, but the paintings are there, and the paintings are done in utmost elaboration. They're very elaborate painting, they're not just conceptual paintings. There are a lot of details, and they're inside the caves too. And the caves are the places which are the dark places, right? You don't have a source of light. So and again, the painting inside the caves too are very elaborate. So I couldn't figure out how did they do this, because without the light, how can you do so? Only source of light back then was fire, right? Or the sun rays, and sun rays can't make it to that because it's a dark place. Of course, it's a cave. It will be stupid to expect that the sunlight is entering. And of course, when you bring the fire, it's again a problem because the colors which are used are organic. They have been extracted from plants, etc., etc. And any organic material, when reacts with fire, forms carbon, right? Yeah. So it would have just gone if they would have used fire as a source, right? For source of light. So I just figuring out, the guide couldn't answer me. He didn't had satisfactory answer. He just couldn't. But in the evening, we all, along with the students, I too met with Professor Deshpande, who was an expert of that region of architecture. And it was a part of itinerary that we were supposed to meet Professor Deshpande. But I did ask him this question, that how did this work? Because I was still struggling to understand. And there was something which was really troubling me, that this cave was unlike any other cave in general. So in these caves, you enter and then you step down. There's a ditch, large ditch inside, and which normally doesn't happen in any other cave architecture. Normally, it's either enter and it will be sloping up inside, or it will be almost flat. And so it is exception if you see that there's a ditch kind of a thing. So I asked them as well why there was a ditch and how did they do the paintings. He said to me that the ditches were there to do the paintings. I say, what do you mean to say? Then he had got a wooden model kept at his house, a cross-sectional model. Cross-section is basically when you cut a building, so that's a section of it. Cross-section, the similar thing. So there was a sectional model, and where the ditch was already seen, and what he did, he brought it, he turned off all the light, and he poured some water inside the dish portion, and then he brought a torch, and the torch was directed in the direction of that water, and suddenly the light reflected up. He said that, this Ajanta cave is in form of a U in the plan. It faces south. At certain times, sun is at a direction that by putting the water in those dishes, those monks used to get the sun rays reflected inside. And I was like, wow, because the guys whom I thought to be the superstitious one, the illiterates and whatnot, were doing such a cool stuff. They were like they're using the so-called Snell's law of reflection to generate light and do the paintings. And that was a journey backward, or I would say that that was a journey which should have happened, say, 2 decades back when I was 3 years old, 4, 5 years old, something like that. But it did happen. I began to read about the Buddhist literature, and with Buddhist literature came the Upanishads. And it does happen that when you begin to read about religion, history automatically walks in, because you can't dissociate history and religion. They all walk together, because history is nothing but the tale of the culture of that place, and religion is nothing but the reflectance of that culture. Uh, if we try to be very honest about it without being politically correct, religion is reflectance of the culture, and vice versa. So, and so Indic history began to came into me. So, and I began to read about the miracles in the sciences, the advancement, etc. What we had made, whether it was the field of mathematics or physics. There are many things which we had done in the past. So this all began to came to me, and I was quite astonished that Indian past was certainly a very bright one. It was certainly a place where, because we have got a text which even talks about exchanges between the Greek philosophers and Indian philosophers. So I'm sure that even if we make, I will not make a very loud claim that everything emerged out of India, but certainly I would say that even if it was emerging in Greece, India too had its very sophisticated system, if not advanced, certainly on the parallels as how the Greeks were thinking, or it may be better too. But certainly we were not those kind of backward people as we have been projected as, because the time when we were dealing with the universities of the on the par of the Ivy Leagues, etc., the Western world was still wearing the leather furs and etc. to make their living, right? So that's how they lived, and their houses were, so we were living in a very complex, very civilized system back then. So we were great as a civilization, and that began my journey into the history, and that actually was the trigger point too. So the both were very much related.
Amazing. So, as a former soft Marxist myself, I kind of relate to everything that you mentioned, right? Because I think Marxism is so seductive in the sense that it offers this fast food answer to all the angst that you have as a teenage person, right? I mean, and you tend to externalize your grievances, so to speak, and want to tear down everything, all old conventions, and build something new, bring in the revolution. Yeah, but so glad that you could find your way back, right? We are more fortunate that that happened. Um, your lens into history, right? I mean, because you are an architect by profession, training, and so on, right? When you look at history, I mean, you should have a unique sense of that, right? I mean, because you're not someone who is from the field in a conventional sense, right? I mean, in the sense that you haven't studied like a typical bachelor's, master's, so on and so forth, right? And there is some discussion on who is a historian, right? What does it take to be a historian, right? Can anyone write history? And if so, I mean, how should history be written? So on and so forth. I know that's like three or four questions rolled into one, but I'd love to understand, you know, what credentials are necessary to be a historian, right? And how do you write history?
So again, people may take offense in this, but any person who is quite objective, is rational, and has got a scientific temperament, and scientific temperament is also something which necessarily may not come to the guys who have a science background. It can happen with anybody, but these are the three basic characters: that you have to be objective, you have to be rational, and you have to have a scientific temperament. Of course you have to have some adore or the love for history as a subject too, love for the past, right? So these four factors can drive anybody, and they can bring up on the table what we call as history. But the problem lies with the academic historiography is that, like, I will dive a bit into, I will take a detour, and I will relate it that how it works. Like, architecture education too has gone through a lot of churning. As in, there was a period when there was a thought that whether we need to have physics, chemistry, mathematics as a main subject or not, whether we'll just have mathematics, and guy can be led to qualify to appear in the aptitude test of architecture. There have been those churnings. I've also seen, I have seen, practically seen, that I won't take the name of the universities, but I have seen it happening, that people have discussed it over the lunch table in a staff meeting, etc., that let's remove the mathematics as a subject because we don't have teachers, right? So the subjects, because it happens so, because The architects in general have hatred for mathematics and the science. I'm just trying to be as brutal and as honest as possible. So even during the qualification exam, right, earlier in my period it used to be AIEEE, CBSE AIEEE examination, and there was a separate B arch. And in the separate B arch examination, you would give the test of the mathematics and the aptitude test. And many people who would make to the NITs or any other place will either be very reluctant to know more about science. Perhaps they would have come here only because they hated the subject, and that hate race even further carries forward when you get into the subject, right? You can see that there is a battle between the engineer and the architect all the time. And of course, and I do have a lot of respect for the engineers because they try to realize your dreams. They are the core people, and that's where many architects fail to relate to it. And because architects live in their own bubble, ego that we are the creators, etc., etc. But it can't happen if engineers are not at your bay. It's as simple as that. So in the field of history too, somehow the historiography, as people try to make it, it was suited to the people who were doing it, because there were no gatekeepers who were interested in making historiography happen to be an objective subject. It was just that certain bunch of people, say 10, 20 or 30, who whatever their number would be, they decided that this is the way we are going to approach history, and certain facts which have been stated there's and they are the theories now. So what facts get established become theory. You have hypothesis, you research on it, and when you establish it becomes theory. So like Aryan vision theory, it, though there was no evidence for it, but it was read as a theory for a very long period. And that's a premise. Now you base your history on that. That's a basic checklist, a parameter, and now you are going to march ahead with it. The basic parameter that Indian society was a casteist society, and it was so ridiculous one that it oppressed everybody who was weaker, right? So these are the basic parameters based on which you do your historiography. But what a rationalist mind do, or what a scientific temperament to do, is that say that okay, fine, I will nullify all of these things, and I will try to relook at it from a perspective of someone who is trying to decipher that what happened in say 1500 BC. Maybe he will look at the genetic studies, maybe then he will look at the archaeological evidences, maybe he will look at any other inscription, etc. Whatever would come through, he will use the method of triangulation, as in all the facts will be superimposed, collated, and then you will come to a conclusion, right? You will not go ahead with a preconceived notion, and this is how this is supposed to be. But unfortunately, academic historiography still happens that way, with a set notion that this is how it happened. Like Ashoka has been declared to have become Buddhist of Kalinga War. This is a preset notion, is still in the academic history, though the primary sources deny it. So you pick any academic book, though this has this not be debunked even, because this has always been a, if you look the text of the history book, I'm not referring to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's discovery of India. Let's keep it aside, because that's, of course, there's some very incredible things in that too. But the way the ancient India has been laid is a very problematic one. But if we keep that aside, any other book of academic interest, non-academic interest in that era, which were written purely to talk about Ashoka, they're very clear that Ashoka was Buddhist even before the Kalinga War, right? But the moment it gets to the academic historiography of India, there's a problem. You see that Ashoka is becoming Buddhist after the Kalinga War. So there is no enough triangulation, there is no enough idea to inspect into it, there is no enough conviction to really inspect history as it is. You are just trying to produce pamphlet based on certain set of ideas which has been given to you. So that's the reason why you see already refuted material surfacing again. A caravan posting same article every year that Hindus destroyed Nalanda, but any common sense or logic will just deny what they're trying to claim. So in fact, me as an architect, it's not necessary that I will relate it always with the buildings or urban planning, etc. But Being a trained architect, I have learned one thing, that I don't even agree to a lot of architects, because they also tend to choose a non-rational path, because as I said, in a bubble of making concepts look beautiful and everything, they do some very ridiculous stuff which will not happen, that will exist only till the 3D renders, and after that the real world is much more different, right? And so have the historians done the same mistake. But I do see as an architect that I have to be rational. It's okay even if, say that I believed in something and it goes for a toss that now it's not correct, so I will choose to reject that and I will accept the fact, and any rational training pushes you for that. So that has been quite easy for me, and I won't say that it is a unique angle, because this is how the angle needs to be towards a subject which is so important, because you're trying to talk about certain historical figure who is not coming here to defend themselves, right? You're writing about them, and then you can make all the bold claims, and just because you are some PhD from some XYZ university, so we are not gonna take it on a face value. Rather, we will ask the questions, we will ask your methodologies, and that is what is happening. And so maybe that many people would be not very happy, me as an architect coming to do the historiography, but perhaps I feel that I have chosen the path which all the historians should have chosen. Be rational, be objective, triangulate, be, it's okay if your preconceived notion gets wrong.
Yeah. No, I see that, obviously there is a huge pushback on some of these presuppositions, right? I mean, you mentioned the Aryan invasion theory, or, uh, um Ashoka's, conversion to Buddhism, was that before or after the Kalinga War, and plenty of things post that as well, right? I mean, um, and this has been led by, the likes of Vikram Sampath. Meenakshi Lekhi ji, of course, has produced amazing work over the last 30 years. We've had Sanjeev Sanyal on the podcast, and plenty of others, right? I mean, I do see that there's a pushback, and this is from, not necessarily professional historians, like as in people who are, would qualify as conventional historians, like someone like Mr. Sanyal, for example, right? I mean, someone, again, like much like yourself, he's an urban planner, right? Related professions, not the same, is what I understood in our conversation before this, right? Right, he's again looking at it from an outside-in perspective, but again being very rational about it, looking at first sources, primary sources, looking at the scientific evidence, so on and so forth, and trying to make sense of this and counter these narratives, right? And there's been a huge outrage about this, right? I mean, it's certainly not been easy, because obviously, like, the vested interests have sort of cried foul about, what this means and so on. So anytime this whole rewriting history or something comes up, right? I mean, there's a huge fuss and uproar about that, right? So what do you make of that?
So the problem lies that people are more concerned about what would happen to the papers they wrote in the past. They're not concerned about what would happen to the soul of those people who have gone by, the people of the past. They're more worried about themselves. Like, I'm sure that because Veer Savarkar also believed in Aryan invasion theory, he did believe, because that was the agreed notion back then. But had he been alive today, he'd have been happy to be said, proven wrong, and I would have said that, rather than saying that he would have been happy to be proven wrong, I should say that he would have been happy to know that he was wrong. He was one such guy who was a rationalist and who was ready to evolve himself. He was ready to evolve his own community by large, right? So they would have been the happy people, but the certain folks who come from certain universities, or who have been sitting there safeguarding the chairs of those professional historiography or academic historians, they seem to be perturbed, because, see, as I told earlier, that when you begin to work with a certain checklist, preset parameters, that yes, okay, in 1500 BC Aryan came and initially invaded, but later on they made it a migration, someday it will become tourism, etc., what not, I don't know what, but they begin with that. Then comes your caste atrocities, because the Aryans have come, they have brought with them the Vedas, and Vedas Purush Sukta is the source of the caste discrimination, and many go even further to say that that's the source of racism which exists on the earth, right? When this whole thing of the Black Lives Matter movement was picking up, then they were not shy of to bring in the Vedas too into the picture. They were not because India has nothing to do with what the whites are doing with the blacks or vice versa, right? I'm not trying to play, trying to say that somebody is wrong or somebody is right, but whatever is happening between the black and white or whatever has nothing to do with the Indians, but they dragged Indians too into it and began to blame the Vedas. And why this is happening? Because certain historians are giving fodder. Certain historians are giving all the fuel which needs to ignite that fire, right? Even if now somebody is saying that racism wouldn't have existed had Indians not been there or had they not practiced the ugly caste system, right? And so I'm not a caste atrocity denier. I do believe that certainly something would have happened, because if smoke is there, fire certainly would have been. So there would be something for sure. But it was certainly not the way they want to project it, because there was a nature of society back then. You talk about Egypt, you talk about Iran, you talk about any such place, right? There had been societal hierarchies where there had been certain operation. It existed. It was a basic human nature. And I'm very sorry to tell to the people, even Buddhism was not alien to it. In fact, during the Buddhism, caste system got concretized, and it's shown by the text. And so we will not talk much about it today because this is not the subject of the day. But surely, if people are interested to know about it, they can look into that what exactly was the caste structure during the Buddhist period too. So a sect which you like to see as something which is a rebel against the caste system or something like that, it was actually talking about it, and even more rigidly. In fact, it blames Brahmins for not marrying into their caste. They're doing intercaste marriages because they are now questioning the purity of the blood. This is what the Buddhists are doing. So again, this is coming out from the text, and I'm not here to blame Buddhism or the Buddhists for it. Neither I'm gonna blame Hindus for anything or something. Neither I'm gonna blame Jains for anything, the ill practice, if at all something is there. Because the society of the Hindus, or largely being called Hindus because all are Hindus in my eyes, or the Indic system, was always ever evolving. Because Sanatan is something which keeps evolving. Sanatan doesn't mean that you are frozen in the time, because time moves. You adapt with the time, you adapt with the system, and that's how you evolve. Like how water flows, it just takes the shape of the container in which you keep it in. It's like a water body. So, but they have been perturbed that somehow certain people are coming in who have nothing to do with academia. Nothing happens to me that what you can crib about me, or you can crib about, say, Vikram Sampath, you can crib about Sanjeev Sanyal, and of course I'm too small in front of all those guys, but you can crib about all of them. But how can you take away other things professionally what they're doing, because they don't come from their field at all, right? So it doesn't matter to them whatever you do. You can't block their roads, right? They will keep doing what they're doing, and that's certainly something which is troubling them, because the whole case of the plagiarism which was put against Vikram Sampath, that was so interesting actually, because the guys who are blaming a plagiarism on Vikram Sampath, say, who was the lady in action, Audrey Truskay. So the size of her books, as in what she writes as biography, is equal to the size of the citation what Vikram Sampath does. So the bar has been raised so high. Now I'm sure that will have to find better ways to counter it, because people don't take them seriously anymore too. Even Irfan Habib is coming out and saying that, hey, okay, Mathura Kashi were destroyed by Aurangzeb. It's known fact.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean, and there's been more work like this, right? I mean, every year we've seen a couple of books or more, maybe two, three others, right, challenging these presuppositions, and that is so important for us to counter this false narrative that's held sway in modern India, right? I mean, Thankfully, that is happening at a more rapid pace, I would say, right? But sometimes when I look at your, Twitter timeline and so on, I mean, the kind of vicious trolling that happens, right? I mean, it's just very sad to see, for someone who is, just trying to put some objective stuff out there. How do you deal with this kind of stuff?
Because I'm objective, so I'm able to deal with it. Because see, it's very simple that I do understand that people from all the sides carry certain emotions, and I do respect it as well. And that's why I engage at times. Though people have told me not to engage, and I'm trying not to engage anymore. And there have been people like Amish will tell directly. Vikram Sampath has told it several times. No, Abbas, no, no, no. Only columns and books. But Abbas being Abbas becomes a naughty boy and goes there and but still I'm improving, and I'm telling to them as well that yes, you though you complain, but I'm improving. I'm certainly improved guy. I don't respond to the trolls. But on the other side, I do really respect the emotion, because the respect is in this sense that either for or against, pro or anti, it's so beautiful that people are looking to express their emotion on something for which world was not Indians were not ready to discuss even about at least a decade back, or say 2 decades back. History was the most ignored thing. People were not at all interested. Of course, we have the statistics with the books like that of Vikram Sampath selling 50,000 and so on and more, in fact, and like how size work is selling, right? So we have seen the books which would have been inconsequential at least 2 decades back, not because of their content. The content is same, even if the content is similar, maybe that people wouldn't have looked to engage that much. Social media has, of course, made that easier. They are able to do it, but it's good that they are doing. I only hope that people don't have agendas, because if you have got agenda, then you will not even look to improvise upon yourself. I was a Marxist, but still I was a patriotic person, so perhaps that's the reason why I could make a comeback. And I have a notion, I have a belief that these guys also have they are very positive. They want to do good for their country, and that's why they want to troll anybody whom they feel that is not doing good for country. So I don't feel angst, I don't feel irritated, but you feel bad at times. That of course you will feel bad if you are being trolled and something, and especially when you see when you something goes against your belief, because what they are saying is against my belief, in short, right? And of course I know that I have done my homework, I have done certain research, that's why I'm coming at it. But I'm largely hurt not because of that, but as I said earlier, that people really take a lot of time to recover if someone hits your belief system, or someone a belief system as in whatever you are believing in. So they're questioning my belief or whatever I am putting across. But it needs to go on, and I'm sure that if they do read my work and they open their mind, maybe that they will come to align with my views.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But I would say, I mean, you should perhaps rank order the kind of people that you respond to, right? I mean, only pick the ones who are truly worth it, because some people are just like out there, just
Yeah.
just trolling for trolling's sake, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it comes back to that I became a Marxist only because I thought that मैं दुनिया बदल दूंगा. So that insect perhaps had still not gone out of me.
So the
Still,
revolution still lives in you.
yeah, it lives, and I perhaps it will die someday, but it shouldn't die. Also, this is what I feel, that
Right.
keeps me going on. And there are people who tell me that there are other side of people who say that okay, and you write and everything, but you should respond as well. But no, but it's my realization that for my own peace, I should disassociate and get dispassionate about Twitter or X, whatever it is right now, because that can certainly gives us hits, likes, and everything. That's fine. You can feel good about that, but we are here to do something substantial, and the substantial thing would happen only through the books, because Twitter became X. Tomorrow it may be zero as well. I mean to say, it may not exist. Who knows, right? But there are something like we are recording something right now, and of course it will put across YouTube. That's there. Even if YouTube is not their platform, you have got that video, it can go somewhere. So it's not the YouTube what matters, the content is what matters. And content needs to be recorded in some way. So if say X is gone, where are gonna be my content? They need to be somewhere. So then comes in the columns, the articles, the journals, the papers, the books. The books are always going to be the vital thing for me.
Yeah. No, I think the written word will never die, right? So long as we live, I think I can, I can comfortably say that, because obviously it's Lindy, right? I mean, it survived from the caves to, from when paper was invented to now, right? When it's largely digital and so on. So, what do you think it'll take for us to develop a more conducive ecosystem for the likes of you to step in and start writing about our history? Because God knows we need more of this, right? I mean, do you think maybe that, some kind of a revamp of our of the way history is taught in schools? Do you think more of a focus on archaeology, for example, right? I mean, looking at things, more from a scientific perspective, that will help. Or do you think that people should make more movies on historical characters, as we've seen in recent years, and that will perhaps inspire a new generation, or all of the above, or something else?
So all these need to come into picture, right? Because we are a wounded civilization. Yeah, and we actually are the wounded one, because of course we were the glorious civilization, and I still have a belief that we have something in our pedigree, because India happens to be the land of extremities. You have got extreme summers, you have got extreme winters, you have got extreme terrains, you have got extreme flat plain lands. So everything is bit too extreme there. You don't have anything where something meets in the middle. It's all extreme. So we Indians have always grown looking at those extremities. That if you look at a guy who's growing up there in the north, he sees the most extreme of the winters, he sees most extreme of the summers, and then still he's there thriving and doing the best what he can. So come to the northeastern belt, there also the topography is what you see, the but they have made the living, and so we have been used to it. So what so I always have had a belief that Indians can always bring more and more on table. We have that potential, and perhaps that's the reason why few people thought that India was the mother of civilization. Maybe for that reason, and we are, I'm sure, gonna bring more and more literature into the place. We are gonna bring a lot of movies. In terms, when I say movies, I also include the video conversations what we have. Of course, the audio versions of podcasts are there, but this is gonna play a very vital role. We are gonna have the discussions what people have during the travel, that is gonna play a very important role as well. You meet the people in the public transport, if you ever share your thoughts, and until unless it really becomes problematic one, because I'm a guy who stands for absolute FOE, that is freedom of expression, and I do visualize the world from that point of view, that it's absolute freedom of expression. You just express whatever you want to, and I always give a benefit of doubt to the thing which is called human being, because we all are thriving or trying to be a human. And while we are trying this, I have a belief that everyone wants to contribute good. So if there is a rational thought, people will go up their ranks, their beliefs, and whatever is there besides it, to take the part of the rationality, what seems a sane idea, they will choose it. So it is bound to happen, but of course the films will keep coming. We in recent times we have seen a lot. So people at times get emotional if some fact has been distorted, but the facts can always be fixed. There is no such thing that this is the final word. You can always fix. We make the drawings in the architecture. It's not that revisions cannot be made. We make the revisions of the drawing too, though they are so important things which goes onto the site. So revisions always have a scope. But just because you saw an error and you stop making the drawings, it will not work. There can be errors. There can be, you can question the intent of the filmmaker. You can question the integrity of the people, but things will keep coming, and we should encourage more and more those things to happen. Like say for example, in fact, Padmavat was, there were distortion of facts. If I have to put it this way, there was distortion. But what that film did is that triggered a debate. People came to know about Padmavati, right? Some ideas started brewing in their mind that what it would have been. So people will at least flip through the Wikipedia page to start with, right? So any project, even if it's showing something in a negative light, it opens a scope for the people to look at it, people to debate about it, people to discuss about it. And if there is a certain personality, if he's a great one, they will remain great. They don't need patronage of the guys like Abbas or you or any of us. We are too small people in front of their personality. So when you bring down whole their history in front of the people in an objective sense, they pick and choose. But if they have done something really incredibly great like Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, however dirt you want to bring on them, he will remain the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj because of the character, what he owned, the aura what he owned, it will never change. And the environment for this kind of writing, etc., needs to be bettered up. And of course, we are moving to do it better. Like I was one of the recipient of the fellowship given by RCS Foundation, which was run by Asha Jadeja ji through the Motwani Foundation. So it was done in collaboration with Vikram Sampath. Vikram Sampath was a part of it. He was a main mentor of the whole project. So he chose 7 of us to be the part of the scholarship as a pilot project. And this book, Babur, is also a result of that fellowship. So we never had such kind of fellowship for a writing which would be pro India, especially, or something which we can say that can support the idea of the nationalistic thought process. Now, recently, me and Vikram Sampath have come up with a new foundation, FIHCR, Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, where we are looking to bring on table the work based on the original manuscripts which are written in Pali, Sanskrit, etc. We are looking to go back to the primary sources and produce the text based on that. And we are gonna give the fellowship to the people as well. So things are being created. What earlier it was only if you can crib about our system and society, you can write something as an atrocity literature, then you are gonna get the fellowship. But the things are changing. There are a lot of private players like us who are trying to do something good. And of course, I have very less of a contribution to even FIHCR. The brilliant idea was of Vikram Sampath, and I am just, like I always call him as a Dronacharya of this system. That he is like one that piece where if we follow his footsteps, and I'm blessed to be always being guided by him, and I believe that FIHCR is going to bring a lot of change in the system.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, really looking forward to that. Yeah, and since we spoke about all of this stuff, I mean, I would be remiss to mention Sri Rajiv Malhotra ji as well. We've had him on the podcast a couple of times as well. So yeah, do check out that episode also. All right, so let's get to the book. I know that we have plenty to talk about, and everything that you mentioned has opened up like many more rabbit holes in my head. But I'm going to steer clear of that and come back to the book. First of all, congratulations on publishing this book, and I hope you'll publish many more. But I'm just curious, right? So why Babur? What was the process of sort of piecing all of this together? I mean. My understanding is that everything we know from Babur mostly is from the Baburnama, which is kind of like a diary kind of a thing, right? So it'd be interesting, like how you kind of put everything together and made it, relevant.
Yeah. So the first part of the question, that why Babur? So see, initially also I said that the childhood is something which always drives you through. And when I was 4, that's when the Babri incidents had happened. The 6th December 1992. I was 4 years, some months. And back then, when the smartphones had not overtaken the mind, the psyche of the people, now you can see the kids of 4, 5, 6 year old also swiping through the smartphones, whatever they would be doing, right? So back then, it was just the words of the uncles, the aunts, and the people around you and of course, grandfather, grandmother, and discussions around which carried forward with you, which always became like a shadow. It always was there with you. So when this Babri incidents happened, it was talk of the town for us, as in Hazari Bagwalas, because Hazari Bagh is a very religiously sensitive place, especially in the time of Ram Navami. So now recently people would have figured out that there's something called Hanuman Dhwaj and all of 50 feet, 60 feet side when Pran Pratishtha happened and people were sporting those kind of dhwaj, etc. But Hazari Bagh is known to be have the competitions of the Hanuman Dhwaj during Ram Navamis. So people will come with 60 feet, 40 feet, very large Ram Navami Dhwaj, huge. And in the processions, when the processions will pass through certain area and the region, some stone pelting would happen. And that's also the period when Chaitra Navratri is happening. So Durga Visarjan is also happening during Dashami, Navami. After that Navami, the Dashami is there. So at times the stone pelting would happen even on Pratima of Durga Mata. So something would happen every Ram Navami. It was a ban to come out during the Ram Navamis. For it was considered that if you are from a good family or something, you will just not walk out because you know the miscreants or the troublemakers are there. So with that environment, when the Babri was always the talk of the town, because you can understand when people have always been seeing it, where Ram Navami is such a sensitive matter, and of course because of the faith, and also secondly because of the incidences what happens, so it grabbed a lot of attention. And for next 2 years or something, the local newspapers will keep talking about the Babri. Uncles will talk about it. My grandmother would even talk about it, that what happened, and so every time this will be there. And of course, me being already getting prepared to be the Marxist till the time I become 7, 8 or something, I saw this incident as a problematic one, and I had this that a mosque was demolished, which was the ugliest thing which has happened in our history. So Babri to me in that period meant Babur, and uh, and of course my father gave the story of the Mughal emperors, uh, Akbar, Humayun not to that extent, and a TV serial used to come back then. And it was on Akbar the Great or something. I don't really recall the name of the serial, but I would religiously watch it. And this had even the introductory song which played was very secular one, trying to mix Ram and everything. So Akbar was entirely secularized in that serial, and of course when the Marxist phase got into me, and NCRT books had already done their job, I had a belief that not before Akbar came into the picture, Bharat was ever tied into one thread. As in, the first guy who gave us Akhand Bharat was Jahanpana Akbar. So, but when it so happened that in around 5 years back or so, the TV debate got heated up, where somewhere India Today had actually put a meme where it said that during the Mughal period, India's GDP share was 25%. And I was like, okay, and I cross-checked the source was Angus Madison's. So that source gave even more interesting data. And then already India Today has given the source, are people on the two sides are already in the fighting mode, and this he did this, and many WhatsApp university gyan is coming from both the sides too. And but I thought that let me go back to the source which they are quoting, Angus Madison. And when I looked at the source, I was baffled, because in 1500 AD, that source says that our GDP share was 25%, 24 point something to be precise, and in 1000 CE or 1000 AD or 80,000, our GDP share was 28 point some percent. In 180 or 1 CE or 81, our GDP share was 32 point some percent. So 32%, 28%, 25%. And our GDP share, according to that source, got below China drastically for the first time during the reign of Akbar the Great. So that opened up a thing, and I thought that I need to give more studies. And the more and more I studied, the facts which came up kept on baffling me. And I was, of course, I was troubled because the image of the secular Mughals was falling apart, the loots and everything was coming into my eyes, because I was told that they came and they became one of us. Though the facts were, the numbers were showing me something else, and everything else was showing me something else. So I did give a lot of lectures around, because after I began to put the tweet, I was called to deliver lectures, etc. That thanks to Mohandas Pai, he said that Abbas PPT bana le, make a PPT out of what you're doing. I did make a PPT, and after the PPT, he said, PPT ho gaya, now why not book? And of course, because Babri incidents was there in the mind, and then because we related with Babur, and then so why not start a series of the book? So when you are starting a series of the book, of course, the first one is Babur. And when I looked at the sources, the first source, of course, is the Babur Nama. That's the primary text. And when I refer to translation, I could see that contradiction in the translations too. Some very fundamental contradictions, like where it's kafir in the Persian. So in a translation, you will find that it's written as pagans and in bracket infidels. So you can't replace kafir by pagans. That means that you have already changed the idea together. It's not against the, so in general, in the Babur Nama is saying about, talking about kafir, which is a derogatory term, but it's being generalized as a pagan, and then in bracket it's written infidel. So instead of in pagan, actually it should have been only infidel, if you want. So such kind of fundamental discrepancies which I found, that some of the translation is saying something else, etc., etc. So that made me think that, and of course the Babur Nama doesn't give you sense of the context, because Babur Nama is more of a personal diary to Babur. It's not an autobiography. So a diary is something which Babur has written with utmost sincerity, but is something which is only to himself, right? He's recording everything what he is facing or what he is seeing. But at the same time, say that he's traveling in a region, say in Afghanistan. I wanted the people to know the context of that region. That, say that when he's in a region, the Junbils. So what that tribe Junbil is about, what is their past, till how long they kept facing the Islamic invaders, till how long did they resist, what were the resistance process, what is the past of every other regions what Babur crossed through, and what is the context of whole geopolitics at the same time. So I tried to cover all those things, and somehow it was important to bring Babur's objective biography, collaborating all this context, some Indian perspectives to it as well, which I would say is the first work of its type. So that's how I see this work, not only as a unique one, not to just praise it because I have done it so, but I couldn't find any such literature on Babur. Either it's complete uh, glorification of Babur, which ideally it shouldn't be, because he was not that great of a man as is glorified. Neither he was that much of a villain as he is, though for Bharatvarsh he certainly will remain villain for multiple reasons. Because the moment he enters into Bharat, what he did is very disastrous. There are many instances. So that's how the book came into being.
Right. Uh, let's look at Babur's early life, right? And certainly, I mean, he doesn't have it easy, right? His father dies in an accident, right? And he is thrust to take the throne at all of 11 years old. And obviously, given the circumstances, people around him are plotting to kind of dethrone him and get a more pliable person in charge so they can have their way, right? And this is also the time when the Muslim empires are sort of in a decline, right? The Abbasid and so on. Spain is not Muslim around that time, right? And these are the circumstances in which he ascends the throne, per se. And you call him the chessboard king, right? Because he keeps moving around, right? So, he leaves Fargani, goes to Samarkand, loses Fargani, again comes back, again loses Samarkand. And then, he is homeless for a period of time, right? And he writes about this specifically in his Babur Nama also, right? And somehow he sets up a kingdom in Kabul and then moves to Hindustan, right? But this early period of Babur, right? What do you make of that? I mean, just the circumstances in which he was thrust upon, right? I mean, they say, people are a product of the circumstance as well, right? How would you characterize that?
So, see, Babur lost his father at the age of 11. And as I said earlier too, that when you read about any historical character, there's a lot of grays. There's a lot of, I mean to say that there are a lot of blacks and there's a lot of white, and when you mix them, it becomes gray, right? It's not all colors basically, yeah. So when I was reading about it, that he has lost his father at just 11-year-old, and he's somewhere far off, right? He's not in the place when his father dies, and still he has collected the memories of his father so beautifully. The way he explains that how he looked like, he has used a humor that about how the physique of his father was. He's trying to, and he's writing when his father has died. So at times, if we just try to relate with our current times, that if we have lost somebody close by, and someday we all meet together and we talk all the good about him or her, right? So Power was doing exactly the same in his personal diary, and while he is writing it, he is facing all sort of adversaries. He's not having a good time for sure, because apart from having lost his father, his uncle is conspiring. Ahmad is trying to come back. Mahmud is trying to come. The two Mahmuds, one of them is uncle from a paternal side, other from a maternal side. The one on the mother side, with the maternal side, becomes a good guy later on, who supports him a lot. But it is in this period who is also trying to capture the Fargana, and everybody has eyes on it. And that's when the one of the most important villain of this whole Babur's life, Shaibani Khan, also comes into the picture. And Shaibani is a guy like Babur moves to Samarkand, Shaibani comes there. Then Babur gets to know that he wants to run away from there. Gets to know that Andijan is having a trouble. He will go to Andijan. Shaibani follows. So, and it goes on and on. Even later on, Shaibani is looking to come to Kabul as well. So the journey for Babur was all about trying to save himself for Shaibani to a great extent. Apart from initial rift with his cousins, etc., cousin, uncle, and own people. So that's the point. It's more like a Tom and Jerry game, that you know he's just trying to be somewhere, and suddenly Shaibani will appear, and he will again run off from there. And so he is pretty scared from Shaibani Khan too, and it is quite clearly expressed in Babur Nama. So his movement from one place to other, and not being so powerful, as in one who plays the chess will know that a king of a chessboard is all but powerful. It's not at all powerful, because he just can't do anything. He can just move one house here, one house there. And the most powerful guy is the Wazir or the Rani, right? Or whatever the name we may like to call it. So many people call it Queen, many call it Mantri or the Wazir, right? He's also dependent on all his pawns, the bakes, etc. Because he's so young, he can't do the things at his own. And while he's dependent, he's being betrayed also by many people, because everybody is trying to bake their own bread, right? So he's facing the betrayal. So while all these things are cooking up, finally he gets his first territory, or because he's homeless, he's throneless as well. Not only he's throneless, he's a homeless guy too. So that's the reason why when he walked into his mama's or the uncle's place in Tashkent, he's so delighted to walk onto the floors of the palace. Yeah, because he has not seen palace since ages. He has been living in tents. So many times people will see that it's being said in a humor that Mughals to tent mein rehte the, या फिर the ancestor of Akbar and all lived in a tent. But that's true. That's not humor. Babur spent most of his time in the tents, because he didn't have any territory. He was just moving from here and there, safeguarding this and staying there for a while and trying to besiege another fort. So He's outside the fort, camping there. So for that reason, he was called the chessboard king. And many got of an opinion that perhaps this is trying to glorify Babur. But anybody who has played the chess would know that you should be everything in a chess but the king, right? So it was quite an interesting read about Babur, especially his initial phases of life.
Right. So now he considers an invasion to Hindustan, right, from Kabul, because there's a trade route and so on. Now at this point, we're talking about the 15th century or so, right? We've already had invasions. So we've had Gori, Ghazni, the Khilji dynasty as well, and so on. The Lodhis are of course there, right? How is Babur invading Hindustan different from the previous invasions we faced, and how is it kind of similar?
So one thing is very important in whole Babur's tenure, or in fact, apart from tenure, in fact, his initiation to enter into Hindustan, the motivations. So he was always motivated by Taimur, and that he wanted to fulfill the unfinished agenda of Taimur. Taimur has got two agendas. Now it's up to the reader to make out that what that agenda would be. And I did apply the method of triangulation. I will explain how to come to that which agenda he would have chosen. Now, first agenda was to Islamize the whole world because the Prophet Muhammad had instructed to do it. And this is what Yazdi, the biographer of Taimur, is saying. That is the primary intention of Taimur. The second agenda was to establish a kingdom in Al Hind, which Taimur failed to do. Babur keeps talking about the unfinished agenda of Taimur, which he wants to fulfill. Now, it can keep readers guessing that whether it was about establishing a kingdom in Hindustan or it was just about Islamization of whole of the world, of which India was just a part. Now, it is answered by another motivation, which Babur explains. He says that I am the third Tramontana invader in Hindustan after Prophet Muhammad who will establish a kingdom. So Tramontana invader or the Tramontana is basically the region of the hilly region of Afghanistan where he's trying to, and the two guys whom he mentions are Ghazni and Gori. So first is Ghazni in his eyes, second is the Gori is the guy, and the third is he. So Ghazni and Gori are known for what? They were the idol breakers.
So he's kind of following in their footsteps.
Yeah,
per se.
and he declares it that first was Ghazni, and then he sees all these guys as inconsequential, the Khaljis and the Lodhis, and which many times Vikram Sampath says, and then people get annoyed that oh, Lodhi were obscure people as they are calling. They had such a big territory and all, but yet Babur doesn't consider them consequential. So Babur says that first was Ghazni, second was Gori, and third is me.
Right.
So now what this is gonna do is fulfill his act is necessarily gonna fulfill the agenda of Taimur, and I triangulate, and I'm convinced that he wanted to not only invade Hindustan or establish a kingdom, but he also wanted to Islamize, right? Which becomes very clear in the acts which he would do in the days to come, and of course the situation of Hindustan was really much more better, and he was really looking for a better kingdom. What had happened that till 1509, as in till when the Shaibani Khan died, he kept on threatening. He was always threatening the Kabul. So, and of course, he saw Hindustan as a great land with a lot of opportunities in terms of a lot of gold and silver flowing. So you have got a lot of money. You have got a people, as he said, that who are great artisans. And not only they are great artisans, they are docile people who will just do what you want them to do. And he mentions this all in Babarnama. So he sees that to build a great empire, what you need? You need people to build for you. You need money, resource, everything. So it's easily available. Like it's so easy to trade in Hindustan and establish an empire. So why won't he come here? So that necessarily is makes it quite unique because uh, he is looking to replicate the same thing what Ghazni and Gori had done, but with the added layer of establishing a kingdom. So perhaps I don't say that the Khiljis didn't wanted to Islamize, but perhaps they didn't had the scale or the intent or the conviction to that intent what Ghazni and Gori had. So you can't compare the Islamists for sure. That Islamism is Islamism at the end of the day. But in Babur's opinion, those two guys were something.
Kind of tells you what the person's motivations are when you compare his idols, right?
Yes.
I mean, who he is trying to emulate, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so Babur defeats Ibrahim Lodi,
Yeah.
right, and he sets up and kind of consolidates, right, and now he is technically the first Mughal ruler, right? I mean, the founder of the Mughal dynasty. But it's very interesting, right? I mean, you mentioned he is, I mean, on his mother's side, he is actually related to Genghis Khan, right? But on his paternal side, he is actually related to Timur, right? But he originally considers himself as a Timurid,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, should we call it a Mughal dynasty or
No, yeah.
a
So
Timurid dynasty, right?
it's very interesting that if a question is asked to you in examination of civil services, even that who founded Mughal Empire, then your answer has to be Babur, or else you will get 0 marks or maybe negative if there's negative for the wrong answers, right?
Right.
But so be it. But the truth be said that there was no empire called Mughal Empire to start with. There was a Mughalistan which was headed by the Genghis Khan and his people later on.
Right.
But
And again, here we have to clarify. I think
Yeah.
Mughal is basically Mongol and Persian.
yeah. So not many people know that it's a corrupted form, like Turco-Persian language, or they later on begin
Right.
to call it as Mughal.
Right. And what was the religious characteristic of the Mongols generally?
Okay. So I will dive a bit back into it. The time it will be important for people to know to make a distinction that Genghis Khan is a Mongol, right? And Genghis and Timur both have common ancestor, as in Tumane Khan.
Hmm.
Tumane Khan is say generation 1, Genghis is in generation 5, and generation 10 is Timur. So by ethnicity or by race, they all are Mongols. But Timur didn't consider himself to be Mongol. He was more aligning himself to the Persian culture. Aligning to the Persian culture means that so you have to first understand that what a Mongol culture was about. Mongol culture was highly secular. So Genghis Khan basically was secular killer. So when I say secular killer, it means that he killed everybody without asking that which religion you belong to. And in fact, he persecuted a lot of Muslims because a lot of Muslims were their enemies. Not because they were Muslims, so he was killing them. It just so happened that enemies were Muslims. It is proven by a fact that he was also given a title of defender of religion with a certain set of Muslims because he had protected them too. So it whitewashes the point of view that he hated the Muslims that way and he wanted to kill all of them. But at the same time, there was certain, though his state was very secular and that anybody can practice any religion what they want to, there was no state religion. But still, he had two restrictions on the Muslims. The restriction was A, there will be no halal slaughter. B, there will be no Sharia. It necessarily meant that you can worship or pray to anybody you want to, but you have to stick to the Mongol culture. And so Mongol culture necessarily means that you are supposed to follow the law of the Mongols. Sharia nahi chalega. Sharia can't work. So I don't know whether it's a uniform civil code or whatever we may like to see it as. So there was something in which the law of a different culture will not work, because what Islam does is that it inheritates the culture from Arabian idea, because that necessarily it is. And just to again clarify to the people that Khan is not a Muslim surname, it's a regional surname. So if anybody has a title or surname called Khan, It necessarily has nothing to do with Islam, but it has actually to do with the Mongol reason. People may not be knowing it because it may have run from the family line, the Khan to Khan chala aaya, but actually it's not a religious surname. So you have taken a surname of Central Asia, basically. Now, these guys are secular. Taimur is religiously fanatic. He wants to Islamize whole of the world, as I explained earlier. And he has two dreams. A dream is to become the Khalifa or the Caliph. Caliph is basically the person who heads the Islamic reign. And he also wants to become the Khan. Khan is the chieftain of the Mughals. He can't become the Khan because he is not in the line of the Changis or the Genghis. And he can't become the Khalifa because he doesn't come from a particular family which becomes a Khalifa. So, what he does is that he propagates a mythology that I have been ordained by Allah, that I am your prophet kind of a person. And it happened in the Middle Ages that if a royal blood or somebody at a higher ups propagates and it happened everywhere, it happened in India too, so that you just fall into a trap of a mythology which has been created. So he is now seen as somebody as same as the prophet or something like that. Necessarily not exactly equal to prophet, but something like that. So that part is sorted to become someone like Khalifa. Second, to become as powerful as the Khan, he marries into the house of the Genghis Khan. And after marrying there, he puts his puppet there and begins to control those guys. And at the same time, he takes the title of Amir and calls himself Gurkhania. Gurkhania means son-in-law in Mongol language. And the empire what he establishes now, what Amir Taimur establishes, is called Timurid Gurkhania Empire. It's not Mongol because Mongol Empire is pretty secular. But by then the Mongols have also converted to Islam. That's why Taimur also is Muslim right now. So there has been conversion. In fact, conversion also had a very interesting history. That it was a battle between the two grandsons of Genghis Khan. So one is Helegu Khan and the second is the Barke Khan. They crossed the swords because Barke Khan is a recent convert to Islam. He's converted by a Sufi. He's the first Mongol guy to get converted into Islam. And he is quite pissed off to see that Helegu Khan had destroyed Islamic culture. So the fall of Baghdad has happened. Baghdad has been sacked. The Khalifa has been killed. And he's progressing further to Mesopotamia and all those reasons to further destroy. And it's almost certain that the Islamic reign will come to end, and people are petrified. Really, the Muslims are worried. And that's when the Helegu Khan, the Barke Khan comes into picture, and he says that how can brother do this? And he talks to his father Jochi. Jochi Khan is the son of Genghis, and perhaps even to Morke, who is the brother who is heading the golden horde this time of the Khans, and is that I don't like what Helegu Khan is doing. And then they go into the battle in which Helegu Khan is defeated. And had Helegu Khan not been defeated, the fate of the Islamic influence would have been much more different. People may not like to listen it, but Islam was ceasing to exist back then. It had stopped. It would have stopped had this battle would have left a different consequence. So I'm just giving this background so that people get to understand what Mongol and the Timurid etc. means.
It's about 12th or 13th century.
Yeah, 13th century. And this is when all these things have happened. Now the persecution of Christians become a regular phenomenon in the Mongol traditions, which was not the case earlier, because Helegu Khan was a Nestorian Christian himself. And so they practice different kind of religions, different people, but Christians are facing very bad time. And later on, by the period of and Babur established an empire which was nothing but a Timurid Gurkhani Empire 2.0. Of course, he didn't call it 2.0, but I'm just trying for the people's convenience. I'm telling that this is what he did. And he hates Mughals. Mughals are the people who are from the lineage of. So he says in Baburnama that wherever the Mughals or the Mongols come, there is unrest, there is no peace, they are the troublemakers, and he's abused them like anything. So So you are calling him to be the founder of an empire of those whom he abused. So this doesn't fit right in the bill of the truth,
Hmm.
right?
Right. So, how would you characterize Babur as a ruler? I mean, was there a lot of loot and plunder, or did he settle down in India for good? Kind of embrace Indians and Indian culture, so on and so forth. Yeah. So, what are the common misconceptions with respect to that, and what is the truth?
So Babur was certainly not one who became Indian for sure, because he had more adore and love for Kabul for very obvious reason that I won't say that it was hate for India, but it was love for Kabul rather, because Kabul gave him the fame which no other place could, because he first rises from rags to riches only in Kabul. So people can keep on imagining him as being shown in the film as some very wealthy guy and all those things, and someone who is very powerful, etc. But he was a chessboard king. And he rose to the fame and to the glory, and his golden period began only coming to Kabul. So that's the reason why he even wanted to be buried in Kabul. Not that he hated India, though there are certain texts where he is criticizing Indian climate. So criticizing Indian climate, etc., or the people doesn't mean that he hates India in general or something. It will be a bit too strong of a claim to make. But he chose to be buried in Kabul because he had certain thing for Kabul. And for anybody or any one of us, we always have certain place for certain people. We have certain place for certain places which have been responsible or who have been responsible for our rise. There are certain things. So was with Babur too. There's nothing wrong in it. But he certainly was not someone who became one of us or didn't loot. He carried a lot of plunders to Uzbekistan. The wealth was distributed to his beyks, the wealth was distributed to his amirs, and he has given all the account in Babur Nama that how much of gold, how much of silver, what made out of gold and silver have been taken, what else he has taken. He has given detailed account of it. So plunder was really made, and he was quite clear that he is made the distinctions that he is not gonna be somebody else, but he's gonna be Ghazni and Gori 2.0, right? So what Ghazni and Gori did, they just did the persecution of Hindus and destroyed our temples and took the plunders away. As simple as that. He did exactly the same thing. He was following the same model. And because we are talking about plunder and because the discussion is more about Babur, but I like to bring the notice of the people that plunder didn't stop there. And that's the reason why what we spoke initially, GDP per capita growth was negative. I don't know whether I spoke about it initially or not. So GDP per capita growth of Hindustan was negative. Growth rate was negative.
Degrowth, basically.
1500 to 1820. It means that if you are boasting at one side that our GDP share was 25% and the growth was negative, it actually reflects so negative of that green map which you always show us that this was the empire which made India a great one, because the people were becoming poorer, right? So and it is also evident from the text and other incidences which happened back then. Like, to bring to light one of those incidents is about the Taj.
Hmm.
So it's more to do with the Shah Jahan, but it's important that people know about it, because it broke my heart when I read about the Taj. Again, people might be expecting that I'm gonna tell them the tale of thousands of the hands being chopped off and all, but no, that's very far from truth. We don't have any
Or
evidence.
Shah Jahan's love for Mumtaz Mahal.
Yeah. So, but what it really, so even my childhood, like anybody of us would, was that if you go to Delhi, there was an obvious ritual that you have to go to Agra and have a pic from a Kodak camera, of course.
Click one of those
Yeah,
photographs.
yeah,
right?
people, many won't know that what kind of cameras used to exist back then.
Right.
We don't had these cameras, the type of cameras what we have today. And but you have to be in front of Taj, and that's what you're supposed to. But when I began to unearth the truth about the whole empire, and especially when I reached the section of Shah Jahan, I was baffled to know that When the Taj was commissioned, I will use the term commissioned because many people have a belief that it was already a structure existing. So I have not gone through the primary sources. I will not make a claim whether it was existing a structure or not, but it was certainly a structure which was commissioned. Whether it was working over the existing or not, but something was commissioned as a mausoleum for Mumtaz. So it was for cost of 4.18 silver coins. So it means around 4 crores 18 lakh silver coins were used to commission this structure. And this is happening in 1630s, early 1630s, when Surat, Malwa, and Deccan, that in Gujarat and Dakshin, Deccan is suffering from worst of the famine, and around 7.4 million people have succumbed to death because of it. And that famine, interestingly, was created by our lover boy Shah Jahan. He did it, and it becomes more problematic because what has happened that the governors who are operating from these regions have revolted against Shah Jahan, and he doesn't likes it. But these are the reasons which gives the maximum revenue to Shah Jahan. Malwa, for example, is the most fertile belt, and it gave him revenue of around 53%. So I thought that how can I let it go? If it doesn't belong to me, it can't to you, the people who have betrayed me. And they have his rebels have joined hands with Adil Shahis, who are enemies of Shah Jahan or the Mughal or Timurid Empire, to be precise, because there was no empire called Mughal Empire. And so Shah Jahan sends his army, which goes and ravishes the crops, destroys the crops. When the horses passed over the earth or the soil, which was fertile, it got barren for a certain period, because when the horses run on it, it is not fit to grow the crops again. Rain didn't happen, and coupled with the lack of rain and the destruction of the crops, we got a famine, which led to a death of around 7.4 million people, or around 75 lakh people. And just to put in perspective, the Marxists blamed Churchill for the famine which he created in 1943 in Bengal, which led to the death of around 3.4 or 3.5 million people, around 4 million. Here, the death toll is almost twice that number. Population certainly was proportionately very less compared to what we had in 1943. Yet the Marxists like to see Churchill as the villain, but they don't want to see Shah Jahan as a villain or a genocide maker, right? He also created a genocide by that, and the famines eyewitness accounts are so troubling, because Peter Mundi, who was an eyewitness, he says that the people are eating from the excreta of the dead.
Wow.
So there are more and more what he has written. It's troubling when you read about it. So that's the legacy what Babur had left.
Hmm.
So it began somewhere and it didn't end in the right direction. We know that what Aurangzeb did, it was the worst of all. But it's not that the great guy Shah Jahan, the great architect, was doing something beautiful.
Right. How was Babur as a person? We've talked about him as a ruler. Um, certainly grew up in difficult times. Right. He seems to have been a good poet as well. Right. But what are some nuances about his individual character or his family life and him as a person? Some new things that you discovered along the way.
There were a lot actually, because Babur in general was a great poet for sure. I will be an admirer of Babur for his poetry for sure. And but again, that certainly can't wash away what he did in Hindustan, whatever, like taking the title of Ghazi, and after having killed so many Hindus and being proud of it, creating the skull towers, etc. So anything is not gonna take away from what he did. But having said that, yes, he was marvelous as a poet. He was a family man too, because he had this. The more and more you read Babar Nama, you will see that this guy is trying to remember his father almost all the time. You see that he's so connected to his grandmothers, as in one from the maternal and the other from the paternal side. He is really worried about his wives too. He's worried about his cousins, that how they are, if he's finding them in wrong company, he's trying to ensure that they come to the right company and they become good people. This is what Babur wants. So you always see him being very caring for his family, very caring for his people, and even the plunders what he did in Hindustan, like carrying away the gold and everything, which was a disastrous, which is a villainous act. But again, while he's doing this, funnily he's saying that how much he has given to his this cousin and all those people. So he always had his people in good books. He always had it, and at the same time, there's certain traits of him like which uh, a lot of people want to idolize Babur, but this is troubling facts. Like Babur, in my opinion, was bisexual. Babur was alcoholic in nature in the later part of his life. So there's a very interesting story of Babri. So Babri is a young lad of around 12 years old, and he has found him. He, as in Babur, has found him during his first marriage to Aisha Begum. So when he's married to Aisha Begum, he states in Baburnama that he is very unattracted to his first wife and he doesn't want to spend time with her. In fact, he never walks into her room or the place where she lives in. But while he's talking about this unattractiveness towards his wife, he's talking about passion, compassion, and love for a lad called Babri, whom he has found in Camp Bazar. And he's saying that I'm maddened in the love with this guy called Babri. He's writing beautiful poems for Babri. So many people will not be would be saying that how can you call him to be a bisexual or homosexual or whatever. But it so happens that while he is making a comparison that he's unattracted to his wife and he's talking about Babri and he's saying that I'm maddened in the love with this lad. So you can't make out anything, but you have to accept that he was bisexual. So this is something. Then again, his alcoholic trait. So people who want to idolize Babur, there are names like Babur which are being taken by a lot of people in Pakistan, and so yeah, and
We know one famous cricketer at least.
yeah.
Right.
Now the question arises that you generally idolize the people whom you see some good trait in, right? People can take the names Taimur and whatever. So of course, the name has got certain meaning. We do understand, but will you ever imagine someone, you know, even if he's a German or say a Christian for that sake, taking a name Hitler in the time of now, naming his son as a Hitler? Of course, I don't know whether Hitler has got some meaning or not because many English names are meaningless. We know it; they're just the sounds, right? But despite that, is it really possible for anyone to idolize who perhaps will not fall at all in your idol? So, what you are looking upon Babur at for? Because he was bisexual. I know that you are not going to support it. At least the people who are trying to idolize him. He was alcoholic. I don't know. Then third trait, his hate for the people who worship the idols, the Hindus. So, are you choosing him just because he slaughtered the Hindus? Are you gonna choose him just because he took the title of Ghazi? Are you gonna idolize him just because he said that I am third in the line after Ghazni and Gori? Because in Pakistan we know that the missiles are also names after Ghazni and Gori, right? So we understand that point. So can you really make us clear that what you are trying to idolize Babur for? Because it certainly doesn't stand to the idealistic principles of Islam. And if you're seeing him as a revered figure in Islam and you don't have any abuses for him, but you have all the good words, then of course it then reflects upon that. Are you choosing to say that you have got certain hatred for the Hindus? So I'm just making it quite open and I'm just posing a question to them that for what do you idolize a guy like Babur?
Hmm.
What do you have in the book from him?
at best he is complicated, at worst he is, all of those base things that you mentioned, right, of him. Certainly, I mean, those who are idolize him or want to emulate him should certainly question the traits that they want to kind of emulate, for sure, right, and what their motivations are, certainly. So Babur dies at 47, right? Is that kind of the norm around that time? I mean, in terms of average age, lifespan, and so on, or I mean, he's still a little young for.
Yeah, he's still young because his father died quite early,
Hmm.
but there were certain people who were around him who died at very late age, say 80s and the things like that. So Babur died quite at an early age, and because we have seen about a few of the Sufis whom he speaks about, they died late in the age. But again, it was more like a very, I would say that it was very, it's a, I would have a mixed opinion about it because I can't be very sure, but there were a lot of cases and incidences which I came to know from Babur Nama where people died at early age and there were many who lived very long.
Right. There is this story, right? And again, you can kind of separate whether what is myth and what is reality. There is a story that Humayun falls ill, right? And Babur prays that let him live, right? And then he recovers, and then Babur falls ill after that, and shortly after that he dies, right? I mean, is that real?
So, so that's the narrative which we have, and I'm gonna reveal it in my sequel. So there is a lot more to it, and in fact, there are many other subjects in which I will deal with, and certainly the truth which will come is gonna be far from what we know as a popular narrative.
Hmm. So finally, when we look at Babur, right, what is his significance? Because we're talking about the Babri Masjid today, right? Obviously, he spawns the Timurid dynasty right afterwards, right? Humayun and everyone down to the Zafars and whoever, right? A good 400-year sort of or maybe 200, 250 years,
150 around.
around 150 years of rule, right?
180.
Yeah. So when you consider all of those things, right, what is Babur's legacy?
So his legacy is certainly a tainted one to start with. I won't consider his legacy to be a glorified one, which many people try to make
Right.
out of it.
But more or less, how did he impact India?
Yeah, it's a very big impact. I would say that had the Timurids not come into Hindustan, perhaps our education system would have been much more better. We wouldn't have fallen to those dark ages because the whole era of the Timurids was a dark period where we didn't build a lot of universities. We didn't build any universities. We didn't invest in the research and technologies. So, like, uh, I would say Bharat as a pioneer of the science and technology, at least in terms of the ideas, if not the applications. But what really went wrong that when in the period of enlightenment and all, of course, enlightenment was something which is non-religious. There were religious angle to it too, but still the scientific discoveries were happening outside India. But what happened that suddenly India had a full stop to it. We didn't have much of the work happening. If they were sure as the patrons of rationality, if they were patrons of secularism, and if they were patrons of what you say the most rational thoughts, they would have invested in universities rather than investing on their own luxuries and etc. Yeah. So Babur's legacy is all about the dark, bringing the dark phases to India, and certainly that is something which pushed us so backward. And in fact, they are the people who are responsible for the entry of British too, because Thomas Roe got to get inside Bharat only in the time of a Timurid ruler. He gave him the permission, and that's how the things begin in Surat.
Right. So finally, what do you hope to achieve from this book?
So, intent is to really make a case study. It be used as a case study. That's how to do an objective biography. Because I have put all my efforts to be as objective as possible while writing about Babur, though he is a character whom I will never be able to look at as hero. or somebody, and it's a very antithesis, isn't it? That most of the time you write the biography of the people whom you see as hero, most of the times. And of course, Vikram Sampath is doing Tipu Sultan in the days to come. He also doesn't see him as hero, but it's very important to talk about the people who have been enemies of Bharat, what they were, who they were like, and what really transpired in their mind and in the actions, or what transpired as an action in and around them that led to what they did. It's very important to know, because the case studies of your enemies, or who happen to be the people who destroyed your culture and tradition, is at most important, because we are at a junction of a time where the times are quite volatile. We see that something keeps on erupting every day, like the organizations calling upon Ghazwa-e Hind in Bharat in a certain period, but they have set a time frame too, right? That by this period we will be able to achieve the Ghazwa-e Hind. So when all these ideas are cooking around us, it's important that we go back into the roots, right? Because even when Dehlevi was crying that the empire of the Mughals have ended with the Aurangzeb, and the Jats and the Rajputs and the Marathas have become the powerful, and they're the notorious one who are further crushing Islam. So he was also referring to the empire of the Mughals. So they have always been certain force which brought on the Islamization of Bharat to the largest of the extent they did. And so it becomes of utmost importance to know about their legacy. It becomes of utmost importance to know about their foundational years. So that way, this book is not only gonna set a way how to look at objective biography even of your enemies. I do see him as enemy of Bharat, but at the same time, it also gives you enough data and information that what exactly was happening, that in the era of the info disinformation, because most of the times you will circulate it with a lot of disinformation to the WhatsApps and other social media mediums. But you need to have something very handy at your bay, which is based on the primary sources. Not everybody would be able to come through the primary sources. It does happen, say that when you want to pick the books on Roman Empire, you have a series of the books that you know that where you're gonna come. When it comes to the Mughals, or Jadunath Sarkar did amazing job with Aurangzeb. But do we have a collection of books, one, two, three, four, all stacked together, like how we have Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones? That this is the book to go for. So what I'm trying to achieve is that set a series of the books in that line, which can be a go-to literature to know about them very objectively. Of course, the evils, what they have done, will not be overseen. I will certainly go into the minutest of the details of that, but I will also put other parts of the emperors as well, so that people can look at it very objectively, a 360-degree view, but they know the truth as it is.
Right. Fantastic. I mean, that's an amazing endeavor, and I really hope that you're able to achieve all of that. You have this quote up front in the book that a generation that ignores its history is doomed to repeat it, something to that effect,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes when I think about it, so many of our hopes and fears, insecurities, aspirations, all of these, I mean, they're such old emotions, right? I mean, the ideas itself that we are seeing today, you can find a precedence to it maybe 500, 600 years back, back to a totally different time, completely unrecognizable, right? You mentioned a sequel, right? You mentioned a series of books. So what can we expect from Abbas in the next, year, couple of years' time?
So we are targeting to bring the sequel of the book next year.
Okay.
So I'm getting a bit too ambitious of targeting it to hit the stores in January or 22 January 2025. The sequel comes with that. That's the target is. But let's see how publishers plan to bring it on. And the sequel will certainly cater to a lot of things, including some ideas about the case studies on how the Persian Islamization happened and how Persia got Islamized. What was the geopolitics when the time when Babur is looking to enter into Hindustan, like the European colonization has also begun. So a view of the world around when so that I want to build a case that what Babur did was nothing but also a form of a colonization. So it was Timurid colonization in my eyes. And at the same time, I would certainly be diving deep into the rest of the life of Babur and Humayun. Humayun will also be covered along with this, with a elaborate, nuanced way to look at what exactly had happened with Ram Mandir at Ayodhya. And so, yeah, so these are the things which is gonna be which are gonna be covered in the sequel, and then so on and on. It will go on with Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and the guy called Aurangzeb. Yeah.
Of course. Awesome. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of new details that will be revealed, right? So thank you so much again, Abbas, for this. This has been a splendid conversation. I mean, I can continue, but I'm sure that, we have a schedule. So hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast to talk about plenty of these things. Again, phenomenal stuff. Thank you for your contribution to our history and for reviving a sense of patriotism and ethos of dharma in the country.
My pleasure. It was really pleasure being on your show. Thank you so much.
So much. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Do share this content widely with your friends and family, and I'll see you on another episode.